let's give you a quick lesson about color correction in a broadcast environment before we actually begin. And we'll start this demonstration in the tool bench in the video scopes. I have some SMPTE color bars, or NTSC color bars, in the viewer window. So I'm going to tell the video scope window to display the viewer window to get these color bars in. First, we'll do a little customization of the actual scope window itself. I'm going to control click in the window to turn it to green. Most waveform vector scope packages are separate CRT displays in a suite or in an engineering room that could cost in excess of $10,000 for one that's capable of doing high def scoping and standard def scoping. Of course, the monitors inside of Final Cut Pro are also resolution independent, and so they'll be able to cover either format. I also go down to the waveform area and tell it to view saturation and not just targets. We consider this a more helpful way of viewing luminance data. Let's first start by talking about some general terminology. The vector scope window is where we measure chrominance, or levels of color. When delivering a project for broadcast, there are specifications set forth by the FCC on video levels. Broadcast safety laws are a little bit antiquated at this point. We used to have these laws for how bright or how colorful an image could be when broadcast, because old cathode ray tubes or television sets would literally fry themselves or even explode if asked to display a signal that was too hot. This is really not the case anymore, especially as we start to use plasma and flat panel technology. It's no longer even the same ball game. But it is a generally good idea for quality broadcast, and it is somewhat of a law. It is up to each broadcaster to choose for themselves what levels they consider illegal or legal. For instance, we deliver a lot of material for cable television. We're normally going by textbook case broadcast legality. And the company called us back and told us that we were able to crank our color and our luminance to levels that we were taught were illegal. This is the aesthetic of that specific station. So be sure to check for the specifications of output with the company that's actually going to be broadcasting your material, because they're the company that's going to quality control check your tape before it goes off the broadcast. The vector scope window is responsible for measuring the chrominance, or values and balance of color, as well as flesh tones. You'll see that there's targets for red, magenta, blue, cyan, green, yellow, and this pink line right here denotes flesh tones. Well, the pattern that's seen in this window right now is that of the color bars, and because they're computer-generated color bars, the colors should line up perfectly on the scope package. You can see a small light dot in the red, magenta, blue, cyan, green, and yellow targets. This is textbook perfect color bars, which is not necessarily the case on color bars you're ingesting into Final Cut. The waveform monitor is responsible for showing you the luminance, or light levels. These levels are measured for analog video in IRE, and so textbook says that about 100 to 110 IRE is just about the legal limit. These fall to about 100% inside of Final Cut. The histogram display helps us compare the overall brightness of a specific image to another image, even if they're not the same exact image, to get a general sense of the overall brightness. Part of color correction is about consistency. The RGB parade shows us the balance between the additive primaries that make up a white signal. An even amount of red, green, and blue create white in a television signal, and the absence of all these colors equally also equals black. This mimics the way that a television signal is recreated in your television set, mimicking the red, the green, and the blue guns that make up the white signal of television when all are added equally. If you get real close up onto a traditional cathode ray tube or regular television tube, get real close up in a white area and you'll see that it's made up of red, green, and a blue grid. The RGB parade will help us at a glance see the balance between red, green, and blue as we're trying to balance for white or just set an overall tone. Well, what is the purpose of color bars in color correction? Well, color bars are put on the head of tapes with tone to ensure that the playback quality of the video is exactly the same as you intended it in your color correction suite. We use color bars to calibrate monitors. We need to use a monitor that has a blue-only function in order to calibrate color bars on a display. With a blue-only function on, your display looks like this. The general idea is to get these two bars, gray tones, to match using the settings on your television set.